We have a class action certification suit being denied, or at least that classification being denied by a judge. And this is in reference to the touch disease issue that we've seen with iPhone 6 Plus and iPhone 6s. And there's an interesting side note of this story where they actually mention Jessa Jones having some of her property seized by customs as it was in transit from China, some replacement screens that she got from Apple. We'll definitely be talking about that one. Trump says that he is going to help ZTE stay in business. You know, at this point, all I can say is there's no way you can ever know what to expect from Donald Trump. So, you know, one minute he's anti-China and we're not getting a fair deal and we need to not trade with them anymore. And then I don't know if maybe he saw the light or someone warned him about the implications behind kicking off a trade war. But for whatever reasons, you know, I'm not saying ZTE was in the clear here, but he's saying he's going to go in and keep them in business because, as you know, they've got like 75,000 employees in China. So that company shutting down would have some impact on their economy. And really, it all just becomes a big ripple effect throughout the world because ZTE does business with several American chip makers. They sell not only wireless phones, but also landline switching equipment throughout Europe and Asia. So, you know, anytime a big company like that has to go out of business, there's going to be some long-term effects for everyone involved. So maybe this will be good news. BlackBerry's key to smartphone will be revealed on June 7th. That's my birthday, exactly to the day. OnePlus 6 leak reveals more of its glass-centric design. And Lenovo teasing an all-screen notchless phone, which I am kind of excited about. We'll talk about all of that, assuming the stream is stable right after this. And let's see if this thing is going to come off the screen. Does it? No. Yes, sort of. Not really. It just sits there. Okay, so I've got some work to do to make this thing work properly. But yeah, there's some crazy stuff going on. And the first thing I really wanted to, you know, put in the title and talk about and have this so that if anyone comes across the channel, they can see what's going on here. So I will read some of this word for word. Obviously, I'm not going to give the entire article away. I will put the sources for this down in the video description within the next 24 hours and some timestamps so you can see different parts in the video as far as what we're discussing. But Judge Lucy H. Coe denied 2 separate motions from the plaintiffs to be certified as a class in the case. And again, this is about touch disease, and we probably should give some background in case anyone comes across here looking for touch disease solutions. This is something that happened with the iPhone 6, specifically the iPhone 6 Plus, but it's the same factory defect that can cause problems with the iPhone 6, and that is where you start to lose touch functionality on your phone, and it's not usually going to be related to having your phone screen replaced. So this is one of the things that when people come in and say, hey, I have a problem with my touchscreen, the first thing we ask them is, did you have your touchscreen recently replaced? Because obviously there could be something minor. You know, there could be a defect in the product. There could be a number of things that could cause that problems. But if your phone spontaneously or over the course of time starts to lose touch sensitivity, you know, you develop areas on the phone or pretty much the whole screen doesn't respond when you touch it. This is a known issue with that particular form factor, and it was based on the whole problem, you know, in part at least because the phones will bend very easily. So when we saw the iPhone 6 come out and it's a slightly thicker phone, they've added some reinforcement. My understanding is they actually took that reinforcement away from the iPhone 6 because they wanted to make it more lightweight, thinner, you know, paper thin if possible. And as a result, if you put any pressure on that phone, you can cause some of the connections that are underneath at least one of the integrated circuits that are responsible for transmitting that touch to the phone so it knows what you're doing on the screen. Now, I will put a card up there somewhere towards the left-hand corner if you want to click on it, which will direct you to a video that talks in great detail about touch disease and what we can do to fix that and what, you know, the repair community has come up with. And I want to credit the people responsible for it, but I honestly don't know whether it, you know, we've got a couple of people that claimed it. One is Jason Gann, the other is Chris Long, and I think there's even a third person who said that they came up with the idea that it was the M1 jumper, or the M1 pad, which is a particular spot underneath that touch chip that ends up getting cracked. So it's there, it's just not making contact all the time. There are a couple of terrible DIY fixes. One of them includes twisting and bending your phone to try to make it work, and another one is to jam some paper down inside right above where that chip sits so it can put some pressure on it and it'll work for a while. And those are very short-term fixes and obviously in many cases cause additional problems. So the correct fix for this particular issue is to remove that chip, to replace the solder that was once there, and then to go in and run an extra piece of wire to reinforce the area, not to reinforce, but kind of create a redundancy so that if that break takes place again, there is an external part that actually holds those two connections together, which wouldn't normally be there. So if you look up touch disease fix or touch disease M1 jumper, you'll see an example of that. And this has been a long-term solution. So we have people bring their phones in, we remove that chip. In many cases, we'll replace it. We'll add in a very small piece of wire so that if their phone does get to bend, which they do over time, they won't see that problem come back. Now, if you go to an Apple store, their solution is, oh, we'll take your old phone, we'll give you another one in some cases. And there are a lot of details involved in that process. You know, you don't just walk into Apple and say, hey, I want you to give me a new phone, and they hand you a new phone. It's under certain circumstances, and that's what this class action suit was all about. We wanted Apple to take responsibility for this defect and say, you know, anyone who is affected by this problem, whether or not their phone is still under warranty, they should have some solution from the company that made this mistake. You know, there was a defect in the product, and most people would agree that if you're talking about any large appliance, an automobile, a home, anything else that people buy, you know, if we take a look around, what do you absolutely need in your life nowadays? You know, you need to have a roof over your head, or you should. Most people need transportation, and without argument, the cell phone is the number one piece, you know, the number one electronic device that the majority of the population depends on. Like, we absolutely have to do that. We absolutely have to have that to do our jobs, to function in life, you know, to stay in communication, to make an emergency phone call. So this is something we can't have just quit. And when we start looking at consumer protections, the old school of thought was, well, you know, if you don't like the product and it didn't work, too bad, you wasted your money, don't buy from that company again. And we've kind of seen a transition into a new era of consumer protections that say that people deserve value for their money. So you shouldn't be able to sell someone something that has a built-in problem that's going to develop over time, you know, and there's no way to avoid it really, because just the most minor amount of pressure on your phone over time back and forth is going to cause that weak spot in the phone to develop an issue. The right thing to do really is to recall the product or to issue some sort of credit to people who have invested in something that is known to have a factory defect in it. So Apple, to the best of my knowledge, and I really want to preface this properly so that no one can say, hey, you said something that wasn't untrue. So I'm going by the information that I have available to me. And to the best of my knowledge, Apple kind of avoided this issue, really didn't make a public statement until a point in time where most of the people who had purchased this particular phone were out of warranty. And at that point they said, well, if you've got an iPhone 6 or 6 Plus that's under warranty, good news, bring it in, we'll swap it out and give you another one. And that other phone was not going to be a brand new iPhone 6 or iPhone 6 Plus. Again, to the best of my knowledge, I don't know of anyone who walked in with touch disease and got a brand new phone, although it's arguable that they were presented in that fashion. So a lot of times when we see someone exchange merchandise at an Apple store, they go, here's your new phone, or here's another phone for you. And people, it seems that they are led to believe that they're getting a brand new phone. Now, obviously, it wouldn't be in Apple's best interest to start handing out brand new phones every time there's a problem. That could add up quickly. But if we're dealing with a model that has a known issue, which is going to repeat the problem over time, first of all, you are getting someone else's repaired or refurbished phone. So that phone that you're getting traded out for is almost definitely going to develop the same issue at some point in time. They generally don't give you a 1-year warranty when you swap out your phone. So you're making some concessions here in order to have them solve that problem for you. The biggest one being that we know the problem's going to repeat without the correct fix. And that's why you'll talk to people who are involved in independent repair, and when they do a Touch IC replacement, they don't want the phone to come back with the same problem because, pretty much all of us offer a warranty, which is in most cases better than the warranty you get from the manufacturer when they give you a refurbished model. So if someone brings me a phone and I do a repair and I give them a 1-year or a lifetime warranty, good luck getting that kind of warranty from an Apple store, from Samsung, from, LG, Motorola, any of these manufacturers. They can't really do that. And that's one of the reasons that we really go out of our way to make sure that it's fixed right the first time. We're not just going to swap you out for something that may last 30 to 60 days, and then you have the same problem again, and then you come back and you're out of warranty. So we want to avoid that entire problem. And of course, at the same time, maintain our reputations when we're fighting this uphill battle to bring, really legitimacy on a large scale to this entire industry of third-party repair. And I want to talk about that a little more as well. So down here in this article, I like the fact that they actually mentioned something else that came out. Let me see if I can find it real quick. In the original, I just clicked on a link. That's annoying. Let's go back here. So customs and border regulations provide that any article imported into the United States bearing a counterfeit trademark shall be seized in absence of the written consent of the trademark owner, forfeited for violations for the custom laws. And here's the weird thing about this. The merchandise that most of us order, when we're looking for OEM screens, they will have an Apple stamped onto one of the flex cables on the inside of the phone. And this is where this whole thing becomes very, very iffy, if at best. Customs seizing parts that are counterfeit. In other words, they are not the original equipment manufacturer making the parts, but someone else takes a logo that doesn't belong to them and stamps it on the product. That is clearly a case of counterfeit merchandise. When we take a screen out of an Apple phone, or we take the same screen that Apple puts into their phones, it comes from the same factory, it's stamped with the same trademark that every other piece of equipment, that Apple has their trademark on in the same manner, it is technically not a counterfeit because it is a real piece of merch. It is a real Apple OEM screen. It is in many cases been refitted with a new piece of glass, and that's where this thing gets tricky. And I don't know that there's going to be an easy way to convey this to the people that are enforcing these laws, because if you haven't watched already, Jessa and Louis Rossman did a video interview where they kind of talked about the details here. And the thing is that, customs really isn't trained to understand what the difference is between an OEM and a refurbished and a AAA quality and all these other things that we're talking about. But when you take a screen from an Apple device and you remove the broken glass and you put a new piece of broken glass on it, and then you ship it across international lines, and customs comes in and says that is a counterfeit piece of merchandise, I'm not sure how that makes sense, because technically the piece of merchandise that has the Apple stamped on it is in fact an OEM product from Apple. So it's not that someone has generated something that's completely different and is trying to act like this is an OEM LCD. It is in fact an OEM LCD. So this is obviously a problem for anyone who is ordering direct from China. Now, a lot of us deal with distributors within the US, so really we kind of, let them deal with that problem. They get the merchandise here, we buy it from them, and then we get to do the repairs. And for the most part, we don't, generally see these kind of problems. But there was sort of the suggestion that maybe because Jessa went to this hearing in New York and spoke up for right to repair, maybe Apple decided to target her specifically and said, hey, anything that's going to this address in New York, let's make sure that we have that inspected by customs and intercept any counterfeit merchandise that's coming across. And I want to say the order was only like $200 or something like that. So the whole thing sounds a little funny, really. But feel free to read this article if you haven't already. In fact, in addition to the video description, I want to do this while we're talking here. So if anybody actually wants to see what that article says word for word, feel free to check it out. The whole thing sounds just ridiculous. And, just Apple has this weird way of being able to do things that most of us would never tolerate as consumers, and then get a lot of their dedicated, loyal customers to stand behind it no matter what it is. So you could literally bring up this conversation And before you get through the first paragraph, someone who is sold on Apple has already decided they're not going to listen to what you have to say. So obviously that is the wrong crowd to bring this information to, because they're going to like what they like, and there's no two ways around it. It would be a bit like telling someone that their favorite baseball team wasn't any good. No matter how much supporting information and facts and history you have behind that statement, if someone is a tried and true loyal fan, they're going to love whatever that team or that politician or that company or that person in their life does, no matter what. So we're not really setting out to convince someone otherwise, but at the same time, it would certainly be less than responsible not to at least make this information available through as many platforms as we possibly can. So you will probably hear me talk about this quite a bit. No matter, hey, Alien Fix, how's it going? I haven't seen you here for a while either, or Lisa Forbes. I assume you all have been busy. No matter, and 1001 Noisy Cameras, good to see you here. Thank you for mentioning that. Please like the video, folks. If you like this video, it will help me tremendously. That's all I ask for. Outside of that, just your attention and your input is what I'm really after here. No matter how you fix touch disease, it will still go bad in the long term. The problem is not the chip, it's the frame. And I'm certainly not going to disagree with you there, Alien. I do believe that running the M1 jumper will prevent the short-term return, that problem from reoccurring in the short term. But you're absolutely right. There's a weak spot in that entire board is attached so firmly to the frame on the inside that any little bit of pressure that hits the frame is being transferred through. So I would agree that over time you're going to have a problem again. I will say though, knock on wood, all the touch ICs that I've replaced, I have only had, I want to say I had one come back, and I'm convinced it was because the factory solder that was on the chip when I got it. So I cleaned off the chip, I reballed it with leaded solder, put it back in the phone, and I haven't seen it since. So maybe I've been lucky. But yeah, there are several other things that can go bad. I actually had one that came in last week, and someone had tried to do their own fix by jamming a bunch of paper right on top of the logic board, or right into the area where the chip is going to be. And it's funny, I was trying to do so many things at once, and we're so used to doing them as they come in and just treating them all the same. And I just assumed that it was the Mason chip. That's the one that we always replace by default, because we know there's an issue there. We know that running that jumper is important. Put it all together and still had no touch functionality. And then, I started really paying attention. I noticed there were no gray bars at the top of the screen. So that's the other telltale sign, obviously. So I suspect that there's something else in the system. Unfortunately, the customer didn't have time to wait for me to take it apart and go through the whole process again. So hopefully I'll get a look at that one later this week. But I will say at the very least, it is a preventative measure. It's taking a step that the manufacturer certainly doesn't take when they try to solve the problem for the customer by giving them another phone that's constructed in exactly the same way. I would not put it past ICE to flag iPad rehab future shipments for more intensive examination. Yeah, and I would agree. And we saw that they kind of cracked down on a company here in San Francisco a couple years ago who were in fact selling products that I don't know whether they were counterfeit or not, but they certainly had Apple logos stamped on them. And I want to say it was like the iPhone 4, the iPhone 4S back doors that had Apple logos. And if I remember correctly, it was claimed that they were counterfeit, but yet they had an Apple stamped on them. And we found out a long time ago, if something is an aftermarket part, you want to make sure that you're buying one that does not have any branded logos on it. And that's, the first thing that we saw with the Samsung was, okay, now when we replace the glass on a front of a Samsung Galaxy phone, we either get an OEM piece of glass or we get an aftermarket glass that doesn't have Samsung stamped on the front of it. Easy enough. And for customers, it wasn't generally an issue. There's not a whole lot of people who said, oh, I've got to have that Samsung logo stamped on there or else. But I could imagine that if you were dealing with an iPhone, there would be quite a few people who have to have that logo on the back. They make these cases that literally have a porthole cut in the back of the case just so you can see the logo. Of course, with the iPhone 8 or any iPhone that has or will have wireless charging in the future, of course, that's going to be an issue using a lot of these cases anyways. But certainly a big difference between an Apple customer in my experience, wanting to have that logo showing. I've got to see that it's legit. Whereas, any other brand, whether it was an LG, like you remember the G4s, they used to have Verizon stamped on the screen, and then we would have the Samsung screens that had Samsung stamped on the front. Nobody really cared about that too much. I tell them, hey, I've got a piece of glass for you. We can replace it. It's tempered. It's Gorilla Glass 3 or whatever it was at the time. It doesn't have a Samsung on it. Nobody cared. But when it comes to Apple, quite a few people take issue with that. Gichano Jr., hey, I am glad you are here because you asked me a question and I wanted to answer that, but it was going to be way too long for me to type, so we can do that right now. I know this is off topic, but when are you making the update video on your equipment? Exactly. So, long story short, the only thing that update is going to include is some additional equipment that I purchased. And you would probably get great advice from the people that are in the chat right now. And the question that, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, is probably Gaetano, not Gitano. The question that he had was, should I buy the lower end soldering equipment? Should I save up to get something, that's pretty decent? And really, my answer is still going to be the same as I said in the video. It all kind of depends on your intention. So, would I buy a $100 soldering station knowing that there's a good possibility that in a couple months I'm going to end up buying a $500 soldering station? And my answer would be probably not, and for the same reasons. One, if you buy any of the equipment shown in that video, worst case scenario is you decide that, hey, micro soldering is not for me. You turn around and you sell that, and you're not likely to lose very much money in the process. Now, I don't want to discourage you from getting something like that 852 station that's got hot air and a soldering iron built into it. The only thing is you're not going to get the same consistency that you would with the Hako equipment and with the hot air station that I show in the video. So that's a tough one to answer. Now, there is a lower end. There's a Hako station. I want to say it's an FX something or other, and maybe you guys can help me out on this, but it's another decent soldering station that runs about $100. It's going to be better than the lower end one that I showed in the video, but it's not going to have hot air built into it. So you're still going to have to make that investment one way or another, because there are quite a few things, especially when you're dealing with ICs. You've got to have hot air. You've got to have consistent hot air. And if you're doing something like a PS4 HDMI port, you've got to have pretty decent output on that hot air, or you're never going to get that thing off of the board without, possibly causing some more damage. So, it's hard for me to answer this question for you or for anyone else. It really depends on realistically what you're looking at in the future. Now, I will say this. If someone has never picked up a soldering iron in their entire life and they have no idea where to start, you certainly don't want to invest $1,000 in equipment to find out that you cannot, you can't do it. It's not for you. You don't like it. Your hands are too shaky, anything else like that. So in that situation, I don't have any problem recommending that 852 unit just to practice with, just so that you can understand the concepts behind surface tension, where to use flux, how much heat you have to generate, those kind of things. It's okay for practicing with, but when you get down to situations where you need a high degree of accuracy, you're going to have a very tough time with that station. And, at the same time, if you can get it done with that one, then you've got impressive skills, and you'll probably go very far by investing in something better. So there was a long, drawn out explanation that might not have really answered your question, but as far as the review video, it's going to be a while before I do, updating the video, it'll be a while before I do a complete video on all of the equipment that I have, because my intention was to just introduce some new things that I've added. So I don't think that I really need to go through and show all the stuff that I already did. I haven't changed much. I've only added a few things on here and there. In fact, I was going to show you all something. And I might as well do it before I forget, because I have a tendency for that to happen. So I just got this in the mail, and unfortunately I don't have my overhead camera set up yet, but I did go ahead and buy the G-Lon tool, and this is one of those things I'm talking about that I've added to my collection. Let's get this out here. And this is, that's going to be fun to look at behind this chroma. This is supposed to enable us to transfer the Turtle or U10 IC from an iPhone 7 flex cable or home button to another one. So what this won't do is if you've damaged that chip on the iPhone 7 fingerprint scanner, you cannot repair it. There's one of a kind. It's married to that logic board. If you damage that chip, you're done. You can't fix it. However, if you have damaged the flex cable on an iPhone 7, you should be able to use this, and oh, guess what? It works with that old school soldering station that I have. So what you do is you take the tip off of the soldering iron and you put it down here. Sorry about this image. It's going to look really goofy here. You put it down here in a hole at the bottom, and it uses the element to heat up this area, and that's what allows you to remove that chip. And then, of course, you would clean it up and then install it onto another one. So if that counts for anything, at some point in time, you might find that you need that old school soldering iron in order to use this little piece right here, because the other types don't really work the same way. So I will be experimenting with this later on in the week. I hope that it works. If it does, if I can take a dummy U10 IC and transfer it onto another cable and it still functions, you know, with the exception of the fingerprint scanner, then I believe it's safe to assume that we could do the same thing. And if you've watched the G-Lon channel, there's a guy there that does like amazing stuff. And this is one of the things that he came up with, was a way to get that chip off of the flex cable and transfer it over. So long story short, the best case scenario is if you tear an iPhone 7 or someone else tears an iPhone 7 home button cable, we might be able to fix it, which would be awesome, and which is something that, you know, we see quite often. And in most cases, people have been told, oh, sorry, you know, we can replace the flex cable, but you'll never have your Touch ID again. This might fix that problem. So I'm very excited about trying that out. I would say this is Alien Fix, or You're Too Clumsy. I would say that you should spend a good amount of money on the soldering station, maybe the Hakko FX951, but any hot air station will work fine, even the cheap ones. Okay, so I want to look at this Hakko that you're talking about. In fact, let's go ahead and just put this here in the station, in the search, and we can see that. I think that's the one that I had in mind, so thanks. Yeah, so the FX951, you're still looking at a couple $100, right? I think something like this, you're looking in the $100 range. And I may be mistaken, but I believe, and I'm not sure where you're located, but I think this is one of the ones that they actually carry at Fry's Electronics. So you can literally walk into the store, buy one of these, and walk out, and not have to buy it online. Again, that's Fry's, so I don't know if they have one of those where you're located. With the hot air, I gotta say, Alien, one of the things that I struggled with, and we got it done, but using that hot air for something that requires a lot of heat, like the PS4 HDMI ports or Xbox HDMI port, it's tricky. I mean, I have done one before with my old station, but man, I was sweating. Like, I really thought I was going to just burn up that board for the amount of time they had to hold the thing on there. But yeah, we've made it happen. So, and in fact, I did use some of that low melt, the actual low melt alloy that I never wanted to use because it was so messy. And if you can control it and use it in small doses, that can actually help lower that melting point on the footings. I wouldn't do it on the data connection points, obviously, but if you lower the temperature on those footings, it's a little easier to get in and out, and shouldn't affect anything because you're not conducting through those points. Hey, what's going on, Piano with Sam? Hickory, North Carolina, not there. Okay, well, sorry about that, but you can certainly order them online. They're supposed to be pretty decent. I haven't used the 951 myself, but I've heard good things, and I think, was it the FX100 that was the really cheap one that nobody liked? I think. I was trying to help a friend fix her MacBook Pro that had a bad keyboard and mess up the speaker connector, and in the way trying to fix it with a cheap solder, I got a tiny cap or something off. Yeah, I will say one other thing, and that is the micro tweezers that you can get that are compatible with the Hakko. I've got the FM203. Those have saved me many times. There are a lot of things that are difficult to do with the soldering iron tip, a single tip. And I'm not saying it's impossible, but having those micro tweezers for me, when you're dealing with those components that have two different places on there that you've got to heat up simultaneously for the most part, it comes in very helpful. Piano with Sam launched a phone repair company last week. Well, congratulations to you. If you want to... if you can, post your link if you have a website. If not, if you want to send some pictures, I will be happy to show them during next week's stream. Congrats to you, man. I wish you the best. Lisa Forbes said, I read Apple releases iOS 11.3.1 to allow third-party screen replacements on the iPhone 8 and iPhone 10 or X, however you prefer. It hasn't solved the ambient light issue yet, but at least it's a start. And you know, it's interesting about that. I have an iPhone 8 with the original screen on it, and it has ambient light issues. So I'm not sure why that is. But one thing that's very irritating is, as you know, if you scroll up here from the bottom, you can go in and adjust the brightness manually, right? Okay, so now if I want to return to auto brightness, do you know how many menus I have to click through to make that happen? The fact that they moved everything else around on here, it just annoys the heck out of me. You used to just go general display and brightness and click it on. Now you have to go into accessibility settings. And again, it's buried so deep in there, there really should be a switch that just says go back to auto brightness, and there's not. So just a minor thing, right? First world problems. No website at the moment, just a Facebook page. Cool. Well, let's check out your Facebook page. If you're interested, can take a look. Might be interesting to see the comparison. Just a small scale thing from home in the UK. Wonder how the prices vary, price of repair. Yeah, well, let's check it out, Sam. So we want Facebook.com, and where do we go from there? And we'll check it out. Piano with Sam's phone repairs. When you get a chance, if you want to add that in there, I will pull it up and we'll check it out. iSam Repairs. Hopefully I did this correctly. All right, there we go. Congratulations, everyone. Check it out. This is iSam Repairs. And sorry, I'm not logging into Facebook. So how do I get this out of here? It's so annoying. Cool. So we're already posting. No. Facebook, you cannot impose your will on me. I'm not going to do it. That is so annoying. I just want to see someone's Facebook page, and now you want me to join the club too. Not happening. Cool, man. Congratulations to you. I think I remember you talking about this like a couple months ago, right? To celebrate, we're giving away free iPhone screen replacement. Wow, is that free part or free parts and labeler? So if you go to iSam, like the page, share the post, comment when done, and the winner will be announced spring bank holiday, which you'll have to translate because we don't have that over here. Let's see. I see a demo from Michael Oberdick showing the issue with the ambient light sensor. Yeah, and we actually had a guy from Germany, I want to say, who discovered, to the best of my knowledge, that ambient light sensor quite a ways back and was trying to figure out the solution to it. And so far, we're not coming up with much. Soldering micro tweezers is a great tool to have on top of having a regular soldering station. Yeah, I love those hot tweezers, and I've been told that they are discontinuing them. The Hako brand, and the funny thing is I accidentally doubled up on the tips because I bought the micro tweezers not knowing they came with their own tips. So I went to Prime Tech Tools, I think it was, and ordered a pair of tips, and then it came in and I'm like, oh, I'm stuck with 2 sets of tips. But if they're not going to be selling them anymore, I will certainly hold on to them. If you scroll down, you can see screen repair prices. Okay, so let's see. Well, you're going to be in a different currency though, right? How far do we scroll down here? Oh, here we go. So screen replacement pricing, iPhone 5C, 5 series, basically 35 pounds, SE 35 pounds, iPhone 6, 40 pounds. And you'll have to translate those because I don't know exactly what they are in American. I think pounds wasn't it like 1.5 when you go to dollars, something like that. I would assume it's comparable. Same day repairs available, 7 days a week. Yeah, you'll have to do the math on that. I don't have the converter in front of me right now, but it looks pretty close as far as I can tell. iPhone 7, 60 pounds. Let's see. Convert pounds. How do we do? Do we do British? Is that how we're going to find it here? Here we go. British pounds. So if we have an iPhone 7 for 60, we're looking at $80. And I assume that's aftermarket. So yeah, that's pretty much in there. Pretty close. 1.52 Canadian. Oh, right. We got Canadian also. So I'd have to assume that in most parts of the world it's the same. Although I've had people tell me that when it comes to certain types, and I don't know if this is iPhones, but There seems to be an issue with getting merchandise into Australia. That last time I was checking, because I've had people contact me and try to get me to sell things and send it to Australia, which for me, it's not practical. The shipping costs will be ridiculous. But they're so much closer to China, I thought it would be easier. Maybe it's an import tax or something like that. Okay, so 1 pound is 1.35. Okay, so I figured it was pretty close. Yeah, man, I think you're right in there with the pricing. So awesome. Congrats to you. All right, so yeah, we'll have to see how this whole thing turns out. But sadly, this particular judge has decided that this is not and it had to do with the plaintiff not doing something correctly. See if we can find it here. They said that the plaintiffs, where is it? The suit alleges blah, 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 because adjudication of the certified issues would not advance the resolution of the underlying case. I'm certainly not an attorney, and because the plaintiff's perfunctory request for Rule 23C4 certification fails to show why certification would materially advance the litigation as a whole. So if I understand this correctly, it wasn't because, hey, this isn't a good cause to have a class action case. It sounds like the people who were filing the case, didn't do their paperwork properly or didn't file something correctly. So unfortunately, that was denied classification. Hopefully, that doesn't mean someone can't come in here later on and do something about it. And the sad thing is that, it's so far behind now that it doesn't seem as likely to pass as if, this was an ongoing problem where Apple was still selling a product that had this issue. We're already how many generations behind? And, again, with a lot of people's perception being that if you don't like the way a product performs, well, just don't buy it, But what about the people that did? That's the real concern. Unfortunate. And then having this whole thing which they're saying, the same day a prominent activist and the repair professional who helped identify the issue and subsequently testified in the class action saw a batch of aftermarket iPhone screens seized. And the whole thing is ridiculous because it says in the article about Justice shipment, we're talking about like $200, $250 worth of iPhone screens. So it surprises me that she would be ordering in that quantity, but I know she doesn't generally do iPhone screen repair, so maybe that's why. But for them to target her is a concern, because if Apple starts picking and choosing who they're going to, say, hey, we don't like you talking about us, we're going to start watching anything that goes to your address. Wow, that's just sad. Why not just do the right thing, which is give people access to the right materials? Because what does Apple really stand to gain here? I do understand their concern with having low quality parts installed onto their phones, because then you see a phone, you don't really think about the fact that some third party repaired it. You go, wow, this phone is terrible. It doesn't work right. I don't like Apple anymore. I get that. But by preventing people from getting access, at least legitimate access to high quality OEM parts, well, you're going to create that problem if that's what you're trying to avoid. One way or another, we are going to get replacement parts for phones. And it seems more and more like we are going to be pushed into refurbishing screens stateside. So where we used to go and say, hey, let's ship this stuff to China. They have lower labor rates. We can get OEM screens, send them in. They'll take care of fixing them, getting them up to date, putting a new piece of glass or digitizer or whatever on them, and sending it back to us, and then we give it to the customer. If Apple is going to do everything in their power to stop that from happening, all that means is that the labor will now be here in the US. So the downside for us is going to be that if we want to have phones refurbished here in the US, we're going to have to pay either to get that equipment to do it ourselves, or we'll have to hire a third party who does it within the US, where we're going to have a higher cost of labor. And basically, we're going to have to pass that cost on to our customers, which is the same thing that Apple or any other company does every time they engage in a lawsuit, which I'd want to not even go off on that tangent. But when we hear about Apple and Samsung suing each other back and forth, if the net sum were nobody made any money because Apple sues Samsung, Samsung sues Apple, and they go back and forth, we're still incurring enormous litigation fees. So where does that cost go? Is Apple going to take the hit and say we're going to have lower profits this quarter? No. They're going to say that we need to cover the cost of representing ourselves in court. So we have to look at what products we need to increase by what retail or what wholesale amount, so that when customers come and buy our products, they can help pay for all these, some would argue, frivolous lawsuits that are going on. So congratulations, customers. That all gets to go to you. So anyways, let's get off that one. I had a couple of other things I wanted to go over briefly today. And it's going to be real brief because I've kind of gone on a bit about this one. And I think that this is going to remain an open discussion because we need to watch these things as they develop. And certainly not the first time that we've seen factory defects in iPhones. Certainly not going to be the last. No company is perfect. We get that. You can't design a new form factor every year and not expect for them to be some issues, some glitches, some factory defects, some minor problems. But if you're going to pump these things out every year and there's going to be a problem with them, it seems like the right thing to do would be to acknowledge that there's a problem and to design something that would fix it properly rather than putting a Band-Aid on it or pushing it under the carpet until nobody's really concerned about that particular product anymore, and then coming out and saying, we'll help you if you're under warranty, which nobody is going to be at that point. And yes, if you guys haven't already heard it, they have another case already pending or being filed against them regarding their keyboard design for their MacBooks. So that's another one we'll be seeing in the near future. And again, something that if they just decide to fight it, probably regardless of the outcome, I would suspect, whether they fight the lawsuit or whether they say, okay, there is a problem, we're going to fix it. Do you think that the bottom line is Apple is going to pay for this to happen? Or is it more likely that they would just roll any cost of solving a problem into the price of a future product that they sell? I mean, think about it. Apple does one thing no one can argue against, and that is they make money. That's one thing that they are doing very successfully. Big public companies like Apple have most of the valuation on shares rather than on inventory and shares. It's irrelevant to their finances how much they spend on court fees and lawyers. So, and that's what I'm saying is ultimately someone has to pay for it, and that party is more than likely going to be the consumer. That's how it's gone on forever, and I suspect that it will for a long time. So Trump says that he's going to help the Chinese company that violated U.S. sanctions, and I am just baffled. Like anymore, I really don't know what to expect. I've done everything I can to avoid choosing a side here because I believe that in the last election, it hasn't been too different from elections in the past, where you generally have, the finalists, the two candidates in the race at the end that nobody really loves. It's not like anyone gets excited, in my experience, and says, oh, this is such a great candidate. It's usually like, look how terrible the other person is. We need to choose the lesser of two evils. So I don't even want to touch this one. I think that we could have had better candidates, from every party. But it is what it is. So yes, thank you, 1001 Noisy Cameras. ZTE talk. So this is one I just had to bring up because, last Thursday, as far as we knew, ZTE was done. They were going out of business. They were being shut down. They couldn't afford to do anything because they didn't have the resources. They were banned from dealing with U.S. companies. They can't sell their phones here. They can't buy from Qualcomm and Intel and Microsoft. And now Trump is saying he's going to help everybody out. And I get the impression that one thing about Trump is he wants people to like him, and I believe that he enjoys framing himself as the hero who comes in and saves the day. So, for whatever it's worth, Trump has softened his stance towards ZTE and says that he seeks to strengthen his relationship with the Chinese president, a key player in the upcoming summit with North Korea. So, I don't know exactly what this means. It doesn't really say in black and white if he's, going to lift the sanctions across the board or what he's going to do. But they're saying that Trump is going to step in and somehow help ZTE stay in business. So this is another one we'll be watching. I don't know what's going to happen here, but I'm hoping, and if you haven't already heard about this, there was an organization who back before the Great Depression made predictions based on tariffs that were being put in place. And what they said, to summarize it, is that we can't put all these tariffs and start trying to isolate ourselves from the rest of the world without thinking the problem through. If we do, what's going to happen is that the economy will ultimately collapse. And that same source is saying now that if we proceed with the types of tariffs that we've been hearing are going to be put into place, then history will in fact repeat itself. The American economy could collapse, and we need to do something different. So I'm going to put my faith in humanity and the powers that be here, and hope that maybe some cabinet members or someone said, listen, we can't just go around and act like we're the only ones in the game, because international trade is just that. It's international. And if we isolate ourselves from the rest of the world, that means that we don't get any money for shipping things to them. So, again, ultimately, the people who will pay the price will be the American public. And if that happens and we don't spend, then we don't produce, we lose jobs. It's just a chain reaction, and we could end up in a lot of trouble. So I'm not saying that ZTE really is without fault here. We already are aware that they in the past have violated sanctions willfully that were put in place to prevent them from selling equipment to Iran. That's the story that we're getting. So bad. I don't know if they just get a slap on the hand now. They did pay a fine. It was like, I had the figure here in front of me. I want to say it was like 890 million or something like that. It was a ridiculous amount of money, at least in my perception, and said they wouldn't do it again. And then we kind of got mixed stories as to whether they in fact held up their end of the bargain, which was to terminate some of their employees and to reprimand them and all sorts of other things. And then, they said that they did. Other people said that they didn't. So I really don't know how that ended up. But maybe ZTE is not completely out of the game yet. I guess we just get to wait and see. And probably a lot of this will be answered after this North Korean summit. I really don't know. But it just, I guess it shouldn't surprise me anymore. The things that come from Trump, you really don't know what to expect. That's one thing we can say for sure. So if Trump steps in here and saves the day for ZTE, that would be noteworthy for history. People who are writing history. What just like off the wall thing, of all of the crazy things that could happen, ZTE is going out of business, and then Trump steps in and suddenly saves a Chinese company who we have all these problems with, as far as possibly spying on American citizens and selling these components to a nation that we have sanctions against, and then we're going to say, hey, no problem, you can keep going. I don't know. This is just bizarre. But I guess we shall see in the near future. Johnny Chang, how's it going, man? Talking about ZTE, does anybody know how to disable firmware reset protection? I have a phone that is missing the previous Gmail password, and it's a hassle now. That I can't help you with. I don't. Sometimes there are. Maybe someone else on here can. A lot of Android phones, you can remove the FRP, but that's something I don't really mess with. So ZTE, Greg M. Said ZTE paid close to $1 billion. I think it was 890 million. 890 million. I believe that's it. I'm going to switch subjects on us real quick here because we only have a few minutes left, but I did think that this was worth talking about briefly. BlackBerry's Key 2 smartphone to be revealed on June 7th. Should we be excited? Probably not. I hate to say it. I want to be. I want BlackBerry to make a comeback. I want them to see the light and start giving people what they're after. But it's questionable at this point as to whether they have a chance. They certainly have other parts of their business that they can fall back on to generate profit. So it's not like if the Key 2 fails that BlackBerry's going out of business. But, I do kind of miss having I'll tell you what, I do miss having a phone with a keyboard. But at the same time, it is nice to have more of that real estate being used by display. So are we ever happy, really? I don't know. There is a new BlackBerry coming, and I don't know too much about it other than the release date is going to be June 7th, and they'll reveal that at an event in New York City. And even the article says not much is known about the new phone, though presumably it will carry over the Key 1's keyboard. And if you haven't seen the Key 1, it is interesting. It's kind of cool the way that they made like their version of autocorrect for typing and texting, where you swipe the keyboard up and it gives you different words that you can choose from. So it looks like kind of a cool phone. It's certainly unique, but would I trade in any phone that I'm using today for it, that's questionable. You know, if BlackBerry wanted to send me one to review, I could certainly check it out. The previous forte of BlackBerry was their integrated messaging. Yeah, and that's, I think, Johnny, that nails it right there. You know, BlackBerry at their time, what people loved about BlackBerry was there were no fees for using BlackBerry Messenger because it went over the network, and we would have people from outside the country who would come to our store all the time, and they would buy up every BlackBerry device that we had because where they lived, they were charged per message for every text that was sent or received. So when you got onto a BlackBerry, you could kind of circumvent those fees by using BlackBerry Messenger. Now, of course, we've got iMessage, so for the most part, I don't know that that's a huge selling point anywhere in the world. There might be still a few markets that are using BlackBerry Messenger, but I don't know if it's got the popularity, you know, really anywhere in the world that it did at one point in time. Integrated messaging system as a service. Now they cannot compete against the multitude of messaging apps among various platforms. Yeah, that's a good point. We have all sorts of other ways to message outside of using iMessage and BlackBerry Messenger. So yeah, that was their thing. That certainly sold them. The physical keyboard, I would argue, was probably pretty important at that point in time because people were being transitioned away from physical keyboards and over to using touchscreens. And it seems like most of the market, you know, has kind of, maybe not willingly at first, but eventually transitioned over to using a touchscreen and decided that they really like to have that much more display as opposed to having the lower third or whatever percentage of the phone was taken up by a keyboard. So I wish them luck. You know, I hope that we have many players in the game again at one of these days. But for BlackBerry, I think it's going to take something more exciting than just having a keyboard, and certainly more exciting than having their own messaging system built into the phone. At least they've switched over to Android, so they have an application market now. That was one of the big drawbacks also initially when BlackBerry held onto their own operating system, was there wasn't much in the way of apps. And if you don't have apps nowadays, especially when the App Store has like 2 million apps now, which, for the record, Apple has also said that all app developers have until, I think it's September of this year, or maybe it's the end of this year, to make their apps compatible with the iPhone notch. Because obviously the iPhone SE2 we've been hearing is going to have a notch, the iPhone 10, whatever it is, 10 Plus, 10s. So pretty soon it looks like most, if not all, Apple phones will have a notch built into them. And if your app doesn't support the notch, you don't get to be in the App Store anymore. So that's saying a lot about the confidence of Apple that everyone's going to stick with them no matter what and support whatever they tell them to, which, you know, they did it to the wireless industry in the beginning and it worked. So the BlackBerry trackball is legendary. I agree, Johnny. I love that trackball. That was, you know, at the time, that was certainly, before touchscreens, that was a way to navigate. It worked. Let's see. I'll watch, Carl, how you doing? I'll watch later too. Crazy here. Okay, awesome. Hey, hit the like button if you will. I will certainly appreciate it. And I hope you're busy with customers. That is always a good thing. All of my dreams have notches now. Well, I got something for you. If you're excited about notches, is it here? Which tab are we looking at? This one right here. Check this out. Lenovo is supposedly, okay, I got it. Get off my screen. Lenovo is supposed to be releasing an all-screen notchless phone. So we heard about the Vivo Apex just a couple weeks ago. Actually, we heard about it at CES 2018, but heard more about it recently with the pop-up camera and nothing else on the screen. Well, it sounds like we're being told, allegedly, that Lenovo will be launching a notchless phone that has nothing in the front. What are they going to do with the front-facing camera? No idea. Oh, God, I'm getting some weird ads here. No idea what they're going to do with the front-facing camera, but there will not be any sort of speaker, like just basically all screen on the front of the phone with very little bezel, which sounds exciting to me because with everyone wanting to have more and more screen real estate, great. Let's get rid of notches. Let's get rid of bezels. Let's get rid of earpieces. If you can make it work, I mean, it sounds like a good idea, right? How cool would it be to watch a video on your phone and virtually the entire screen is used for playing that video back? There's no notch. There's no bezel. There's no chin. There's no front camera, no earpiece, nothing. Just screen, all screen. I mean, if that's what people want, looks like this might do it. So let's see. This is a render, so this obviously, it says it's a partial render. I don't know if this is just I would imagine something someone mocked up is what it sounds like. Yeah, Cheng claimed the Z5 will benefit from 4 technological breakthroughs and 18 patented technologies, which seem necessary given that an all-screen front will require Lenovo to hide components like the selfie camera, speaker, and sensors. Can it be done? Well, the Apex did it, so I would assume yes. The only question really is where that front-facing camera is going to go, because we already know that yes, you can build a screen that will transmit sound to your ear when you're listening, when you're on a phone call, and you don't have to have a physical cutout there to transmit that sound to the ear. So that is pretty cool. And you're going to hate me 1001 noisy cameras because I'm going to jump around here real quick because we're almost out of, we're actually about out of time. It would be a nightmare for phone case makers, a phone with so little bezel. Yeah, and that was one of the things that always strikes me about these bezel-less phones is that the more of the front of that phone that's made out of glass, the more there is to break, the bigger chance there is that that thing, when it goes face down, is going to crack the screen. So possibly good, you know, ultimately for anyone who does repairs, but not really great for customers. If you're going to be dropping your phone and it's all screen, guess what's going to get hit first when it hits the ground? So, Gorilla Glass 9000 or whatever it is really can't save you against concrete or asphalt. That's the hard thing to convey to people. You know, it's special tempered bulletproof glass. No, not really. If it was, we would make our windows and we would make windshields out of it for sure, right? If it was completely unbreakable. But maybe you can rub some special coating on the front of that and make it more durable. Actually, you can, because if you've got microchips in there and you can fill them in, it will help. But it will certainly never be unbreakable. And I think it's probably good for me to end pretty close here because let's see, we already took care of that. I think I've only got, I've only got one more thing, and there's really not a whole lot to it. I knew that first one was going to take up a lot of time to get today, but the OnePlus 2, final thing on here for you, noisy cameras. Final thing is we have a leak for the OnePlus 6. If you want to call it that, I always say leak with a bit of skepticism because really, how much of this stuff gets leaked? You know, how much of the materials that we see online for a concept or an unreleased phone is that manufacturer kind of letting that information leak out to create some excitement and some buzz and some talk? Well, whatever it is, supposedly someone accidentally listed, if I remember this article correctly, they listed something on Amazon in Germany showing a picture of this phone that has not been released yet. So if we are to believe that it is a representation of the real phone, it tells us a bit about what to expect from the OnePlus, the OnePlus 6. And let's see what they're saying here, that these include full images of the device, no murky photos or teases here. True to expectations, the handset is dominated by its 6.3-inch display, complete with a notch, of course, at the front and a back glass on at least the mirror black model. There's also a midnight black variant that appears to have a matte finish, although it's not certain. This means a switch to aluminum. Other tidbits, the 16 and 20 megapixel rear cameras are stacked vertically, as seems to be the rage nowadays, and the alert slider has moved to the right. And a headset jack, or a headphone jack, excuse me. So that will be interesting. We already know some of the details from the OnePlus itself, including a Snapdragon 845 processor and a version with 8 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage. So if I am to believe this article, it looks like this is what the OnePlus 6 is rumored to look like based on a picture that was accidentally leaked and posted onto or listed on Amazon somehow in Germany. I know that's a lot of modifiers on there, but that's what I've been told. So good for them. I hope that OnePlus does something that does create a lot of excitement and gives us one more brand to choose from and hopefully take some of the market share that we may potentially see ZTE and or Huawei losing in the US, unfortunately. I don't know if that's what's going to happen or not, but it certainly looks that way. I think 1 + 6 = 7. I think Lewis from Unbox Therapy has the exclusive yesterday on his channel about the OnePlus 6. Okay, well, if so, I certainly can't play it, but we can find out. Let's go look at Unbox Therapy and see if he does. And if so, you can go and watch his channel right after this and then we can talk about it on Thursday maybe. So does he in fact have something? Don't start autoplaying on me, dude. Ah, I knew you were going to do that. Okay, so let's see what he has in his videos for latest. He has the OnePlus 6 early. So there you go, friends. If you want to check it out, there's more information about the OnePlus 6 on the Unbox Therapy channel. It is his second to latest video, and he can certainly tell you more about it than I can because they don't send me these advanced previews. You know, all I have to do is get to 10 million subscribers though, and I'm pretty sure I could do the same thing. And as of today, I'm only about 49,000 subscribers shy of 100,000. So please tell your friends, share the video, like, subscribe. For sure, if you enjoy this little thing we do every week, hit that like button. I said it enough times, I know. I said it like 5 times during the stream. And what I do here, my Stinger's going to mess with me. My browser's going to mess with me. And I didn't even put the chat on the screen, so that's a bummer because I know I'm going to have to trim a lot of this video at the first couple minutes where we had bad audio and all sorts of other funny things going. So bear with me. I'm getting better with time, and I'm going to leave it there. A big opening for Nokia, and that is a good topic. I think that we'll come back to that on Thursday as well. In fact, I had a subscriber who asked me a little bit, to go deeper into what Nokia is doing. And so far, we haven't seen too much, but it looks like their banana phone is going to be launching somewhere else new. Oh, boy, I can't remember. I'm going to have to pull up the article. In any case, we are going to... Yeah, it is Monday. Thank you. So sometimes things go that way, but you can see my interface here is a little jacked up because I had to transfer all this from Apple over to Windows, and hopefully it's going to solve some of the problems that I'm having there. But that's it, folks. I'm going to get out of here and get back to work, and should have at least 1 or 2 more tutorial videos coming up this week. I hope, if everything goes as planned. I want to get back to doing more of that because my analytics say everybody likes to see how to fix stuff way more than anything else on my channel. So I got to get some more of that stuff going. We have to make a OnePlus 49K campaign for Mike's channel. Yes, we do. I need that. They better give me that play button when I get to 100,000 because someone told me that that's not going to be a thing anymore. And if it takes me, I don't know how many years to get there and I don't get a play button out of this deal, I'm going to be very disappointed, YouTube. So that's why I'm hanging in here. I want to get that 100K. All right, folks, friends, thank you so much for joining me for this little Monday thing we do. I'll be back again next Monday, 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for another. And until then, there will be a Thursday night Google Hangout here, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Not sure about guests. Never know till the last minute. Trying to get these things on the books a lot earlier, but it's hard for people to make plans that far in advance. But we will try to make it. How to make how-to videos. There's an idea. All right, you all have a great week, and I will see you next time.